Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for links to some great online retailers. There's also individual links for knives that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Spartan Astor. This is a collaboration with Les George, and part of their new Bronze Series knives, or Field Grade Series knives, which is really cool because, you know, a lot of you guys, when you think of Spartan, you probably think of the Spartan Harzy, which is a beautiful USA-made knife. Very, very good knife. I've got a review of that knife on this channel. Very expensive, though, around the $500 mark. This allows you to get your hands on a Spartan, but for way less money. This knife will actually have links right down in the description. It may or may not be available by the time you guys are watching this video, but I will link it down below so you guys can check it out. I'm a huge fan of Les George, a big fan of the Talos and the VECP. He's done a lot of collaborations with other companies. We've seen that knife, you know, like the VECP, we've seen it through ProTech, and we've seen the Talos through Zero Tolerance a while back. So it's really cool to see an affordable design, you know, from Les George that's also, you know, a Spartan knife that is just, it comes in at less money. I was really excited about this. This knife was sent to me directly by Spartan, so thank you so much for sending this in for review. Thanks so much to my generous patrons for supporting me. There's a link for my Patreon down in the description, and please follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this guy. So overall length of the Spartan Astor, this is definitely a full-size knife coming in just a hair over 8 inches. Yeah, 8.1 inches overall. Blade length is coming in at 3.5 inches, and your cutting edge is coming in at about 3.4 inches, so those are great ratios there. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. So look at the Rat 1. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and Para 3? PM2 right there, and Para 3 right down below. We are at an angle here, so the PM2 is definitely just a little bit longer. Angle throwing it off just a little bit. And last but not least, the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, which is coming in at almost exactly the same length. And the Benchmade Mini Griptilian, definitely a smaller knife. Let's go ahead and talk about hardware here real quick. We'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them down in the description. The pivot is actually a T15, which is pretty cool. I like the large size fasteners. Now, unfortunately, the body screws, I'm not even going to check them. Those are T6. You guys know my thing about T6. It's not a deal breaker. I just prefer that the heads are a little bit larger. So, okay, pretty minimal hardware, not that big of a deal. Just be careful if you're going to disassemble it. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. So thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It is just a little bit thicker. You can see we've got G10 on one side and then a steel liner on the other, and on the other side, and then we have a thinner piece of G10. So overall thickness, it actually is just a little bit thicker. A fair amount of thickness over the Spyderco Para 3. So do with that information what you will. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. You can see there it's definitely longer than the Para 3, a little tiny bit shorter than the PM2. There's no flipper tab on this guy, so in terms of height, it shouldn't bother you too much in the pocket. It's mostly going to be dimensions and weight that's going to bother some people. Let's go ahead and check blade stock thickness here real quick. Go ahead and get out my calipers. Blade stock thickness, I'm going to guess, is going to come in at 140 thousandths or so. No, not even, what? That can't be right. Seriously? Why does the blade look so much thicker than that? Maybe the whole thing just seems thick? Yeah, I'm being thrown way off here. The blade is only about 125 thousandths. Okay, I'm just wrong. Maybe the jimping just offers a weird visual. Let's take a look at the inside here real quick. So, we do have a steel liner on this side, and it is completely and totally unmilled. I can understand why they didn't do a liner on the other side. That would have added probably some unnecessary weight. You've got a pretty thick piece of G10 there. I always like to see a liner, but in terms of structural integrity here, yeah, this is plenty durable. The handle scales are fairly thick, and we've got, of course, the lock side is a full steel liner. So I don't really have any questions in terms of there's no part of me that wants to question the structural integrity of this. I think that's just fine. Weight. The weight on this guy is probably going to be 4.5 ounces, I'm going to guess. almost 5 ounces. So that's definitely going to bother some people. It doesn't bother me, and I live in Kansas, so I can carry a larger knife, larger blade, right? But depending on your restrictions and your carry preferences, that might be a little bit heavy for some people. If you like to carry a full-size knife, it's probably not going to be a problem. And there's no flipper tab, so, you know, even other stuff in the pocket is probably going to be okay, right? Thicker pants, heavier duty pants, you're going to be, you know, better off. Lighter pant material, probably not going to be your favorite thing in the whole world. All right, let's go ahead and move into the actual review. Action on this guy. How is the action? Thumb stud is placed in a very similar position. You know, those of you who have handled like the VECP or the Talos, it feels very similar. Funny enough, the Talos, there is a Talos in this series, this bronze series, but it's actually like a mini Spartan Harzy. It's funny to me that they decided to do, they called this the Astor, and then they called the one that looks like the Spartan Harzy, they called that the Talos. Okay, whatever. Yeah, this is very similar to the thumb stud position of the actual Les George Talos and VECP. You kind of have to move your thumb out a little bit further. You can't really if you approach it from back here, well, you actually can do it. Okay. I was approaching it actually from underneath, like this, but truthfully, no, I'm gonna pull that back. Here's why. It's smoothed up since I got it. When I got this thing, it was very tight. And I did what I always do with my knives. Nothing. I just leave it alone. I always preach that. Yeah, in some situations, some people might have to take their knives apart. Maybe if it's something you don't want to send it back for and you make a little adjustment. But for the most part, over the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of knives that I've handled and owned, just leave it alone and it'll do exactly this. It's smoothed up. And actually, it wasn't like not smooth to begin with. It was just tight, right? And now it's doing just fine. So the placement of the thumb stud is great. You can absolutely deploy it with no wrist. Because of the positioning, now I can do the reverse flick too. Okay, so that's all coming together. You can absolutely reverse flick it just fine. I wasn't able to do that initially, but okay. I did want to take a look at the inside, so I pulled the pivot out, and it is running on phosphor bronze, but it looked like to me, I was like, am I seeing a little teeny tiny bit of nylon in there? And yeah, that's actually what's creating that really smooth feeling in this guy. It's not a drop shutty smooth, right? This does take a little bit of encouragement to get all the way back down. Just a little bit, not crazy, right? But that smoothness is coming from the nylon washer. So there's 2 phosphor bronze washers, and I didn't look at the other side. There's at least 1 nylon in there. That's going to bother some people. It really doesn't bother me. It's fine. It's functional. It's going to keep debris out of the pivot. Debris. There's no P in debris. But it's going to keep debris out of the pivot, which is going to be great for people who actually plan to use this, which I'm going to guess is the vast majority of people who pick this up. This is absolutely a working person's tool. Absolutely. So I don't have a problem with that. I think the action's great. Easy access to the liner lock here. You can see that there's plenty of space cut out right here on the inside for you to access that just fine. And there's lots of room to get your finger out of the way. The detent is I'm going to call that a medium strength detent, and it is clicky, which is something I like. I don't like a mushy detent. I like a clicky detent. Plenty of authority, plenty of snap firing that guy out. Aesthetics on this guy. Actually, let's talk about ergonomics. The reason I like Les George knives is because they're molded, the way that they're shaped is complementary to the human hand. You're going to, lock in on this knife. You're going to feel the lock in immediately. On this guy, this is a bigger knife, so you can most people are going to be able to get a full 4-finger position on this guy. You're kind of locked in, it's not so aggressive in here that you can't move around just a little bit. You can and you're still comfortable, right? But this is the main, like the hammer grip position. This is where you're going to be positioned. You are not crazy far away from the initial cutting edge, but there's somewhat of a distance, somewhat of a reasonable distance between your index finger and the start of the blade right here. You could force a choke up position right here. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world because this area is more of a guard and less of it's not a choil at all, right? But you could if you wanted to. There is a fair amount of the blade in the cutting path, which is, I don't know. They could have moved the thumb stud up here a little bit higher. They definitely could have done that, and maybe, honestly, an option. I'm not a designer, right? So this is just me like, I wish it was here. And there's not much else going into that. Could have moved it up higher and actually made those external stops. Then it wouldn't be in the cutting path, and it might be in a little bit better of a position up here, maybe. I don't know. Without it actually being there, I can't say that. But the thumb stud is just a little bit in the cutting path. You're going to lose about maybe a 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit less. if you're cutting straight down. If you're cutting at an angle, then it's no big deal, but just something I wanted to point out there. But yeah, the action's great. The ergonomics are great. This absolutely feels like something I want to take out and use. The pocket clip is definitely not a hot spot. It's a nice, pocket clip's honestly on the smaller side, but it's nice and wide, so it still goes with the knife, and I appreciate that. I appreciate this consistent rise in the bill. There's not a whole lot of room, but it should readily rise to meet the thickness of your pocket seam, so that's nice. Let's go ahead and talk about aesthetics here. So this is, well, it's still kind of a functional thing. We've got a medium texture Peel Ply G10 on this guy, and this one's OD green. They do have an option for carbon fiber that is $10 more. As far as I know, those are the only two options of this guy. It's either OD green G10 or carbon fiber. I'd like to see black G10. That's just me. I don't generally prefer, like if I'm going to use the knife, I prefer G10 over carbon fiber, but that doesn't mean that carbon fiber is not good for using. Some people absolutely will go for carbon fiber, and truthfully, no matter what it is, the lines on the knife are going to hold you in. There's basically no chance you're going to drop this thing. I mean, it's the shape of everything, where they place the jimping, everything's fine. Let's go ahead and talk about the blade. So this is a beautifully tumbled blade. Really, really like the tumbling on this guy. I always prefer tumbling over satin finishes. I have my gross fingerprints all over this guy. The tumbling is even and consistent. It looks really, really nice. Semi-reflectivity. And CTS XHP steel. A steel that we really should see more of, but we don't. This is not a new steel. It's been around for a long time. This is a powder form steel. You're going to have superior edge retention over steels like S30V and S35VN. Not quite as much toughness, but this is like take S30V and take M390. CTS XHP should be somewhere in the middle in terms of edge retention and very, very stainless. You're going to have to look pretty hard on the internet to find something bad about XHP. Periodically, you'll hear people say, well, it's a little bit chippy. Depends on what you're doing with it, right? M390 is definitely more chippy than CTS XHP if everything is the same geometry and heat treated, optimally. This isn't going to be quite as hard to sharpen as M390, 204P, 20CV, all those analogs, right? But it's going to be a little bit harder to sharpen than S30V, but it holds an edge for a really long time. Most people really like CTS XHP, and I do too. I wish we saw more of it. It's pretty cool that you can get it at this price point, which we're going to talk about. Blade profile, we have a drop point blade. We've got a flat that carries out about 40% or so of the length of the blade, and then you've got a nice swedge up here. Honestly, the blade just looks thicker to me than it actually is. I don't know. You've got reasonable thickness carried out to the tip. I'm not going to call it a delicate tip. There's plenty of material down here, but you've got a nice pointy tip that's going to be plenty good at your breaching and puncturing tasks, things like that. The final cutting edge does get nice and thin. This will be a nice performance-oriented blade. And the edge is done very, very well. Really, really nice sharp blade that's going to make short work of whatever it is that you're doing with your knife. I love the blade profile. It really just, the whole thing just screams versatility and work. This is something that, I can't emphasize this enough. This is, there's plenty here for the enthusiast to appreciate, but for the most part, this is just a straightforward, hard-working tool. And I really like that. I love how the thumb stud looks. I think that looks really, really nice, easy to engage. The jimping, unlike some of Les George's actual models, is absolutely functional and absolutely does provide traction to catch your finger. I like the Spartan Blades logo up there, and then on the other side, it just says Les George design, which I think is fine. There's pretty minimal billboarding on this guy, so it just doesn't bother me. I think the show side pivot looks nice, very plain, just domed off. Hardware, like I said, T6. We do have a filler tab over here, which some people like, some people don't like. I don't really care. I kind of like filler tabs. I kind of like how they look. Some people are absolutely going to hate it. It does provide a clip position for people who are left-handed, even though this is a right-handed liner lock. So that's good. If you're left-handed, you can still enjoy this part for this knife for the most part. You're just going to have to deal with a right-handed liner lock, which, me being a right-hand dominant person, this is still plenty easy to manipulate with my left hand, right? Let's see if I can even, yeah, I can still do this just fine. So if you want to carry it left-handed, you're going to be okay. Let's see here. We do have a couple of standoffs back here, which is similar to, Les George's other models. It's pretty, common construction. We've got pillar construction on this knife, plenty strong. Stop pin back here is exposed, and there's no rounding on the tang of the blade, which is fine. a nice large stop pin. That's definitely going to be something that's going to hold up well over time. We have a nice deep carry pocket clip. The screws are not recessed. It would be nice if they were, but the pocket clip itself is recessed into the G10, which means it's not going to move. I really like the pocket clip. I think the carry depth on this guy is great. Not a lot sticking up out of your pocket. They didn't try to prioritize the lanyard hole over the pocket clip, which means that thing's out of the way for the 99% of people who aren't going to use it. So that's fine. You do have texturing underneath the pocket clip, so slipping this, over the pants over time is probably going to fray your jeans or whatever up just a little bit. But this is not a knife that I would carry in an office. This is a knife that I'd reach for if I was going to go outside and do something outside. And in that situation, I would be wearing much more heavy-duty pants. So, you do with that information what you will. It's going to fray up your pants over time, but it's not the most aggressive. This isn't Cold Steel G10 texturing, right? It's not like the Recon. That thing is just crazy. Not like that. This is medium, probably a little bit more aggressive than what you get on Spyderco, but not an insane amount more. It's definitely going to provide meaningful traction coupled with the ergonomic lines. So like I said, you're not going to be dropping this guy. I think the carbon fiber one is smooth, but either way, you're going to be just fine. This side of the knife, much the same as the front, except for this is the side where your adjustment head is. So it's not over here, it's actually on this side. Centering on this guy is just a hair off, but that's probably because I disassembled it. I honestly don't remember where it was when I opened this knife up, so I probably could just turn the pivot really quickly, and if not, a lot of you guys have seen my centering trick video. If you haven't seen that, it's in the discussion and controversy playlist. There's actually a guide on how to recenter your blades, so if it comes a little bit off center, obviously we want to see our knife center from the factory, right? But if it comes a little off center, it's not really that big of a deal. This is one of those knives that's very easy to adjust, minimal hardware on the frame, and then just one side for the adjustment on the pivot, so it's very easy to recenter. This knife locks up curiously late. It's locking up at like 75%. Not really that big of a deal. There's no blade play up, down, left, or right, so that's fine. And there's no lock stick either, and that's nice. This is a steel liner lock, so you're not really going to need to worry about excess wear over time. My rat locks up. My rat is a steel liner lock, and it locks up in largely the same place, and it just hasn't moved. So it's possible that's just the center, the settling point, or very, very close, because I've been flipping this guy a lot, right? I think when I got it, it was locking up at like 50 or 60%, and then it may have settled in right here. I can't tell you guys how many times I've flipped this, but that's fine. The only thing I'm really concerned with is that there's no blade play up, down, left, or right, so that's fine. But yeah, there's your centering right there. Maybe it was just the angle. It looks pretty centered to me. Very, very solid. Absolutely what I'd expect. So, where are these guys made? They are made in Taiwan, which is not the same thing as China. Taiwan and China are not the same thing. So, I mean, I think people read, that people are really upset with, they don't want to buy knives that are manufactured in China, and so they're like, yeah, okay, I'm on board with that too. And then they see, this knife is made in Taiwan, and they automatically assume, I can't believe I'm not trying to come down on anybody, not specifically, but just so you guys know, Taiwan and China are not the same thing. Neither of them obviously are U.S., right? I know a lot of people are like, well, they're not U.S., but in terms of the reasoning behind people's thought process in terms of where they're buying their knives from, understand that Taiwan is completely and totally separate from China. Taiwan has excellent manufacturing, and that is showing through in this knife. We are definitely getting some nice high-quality fit and finish, especially for the money. We're getting high-quality function. We're going to get a solid blade geometry, things like that. I can't speak on the heat treat, but I'm going to assume that it's pretty darn good. I haven't, generally speaking, knives that are made well, where they're not just slapped together, that are coming out of Taiwan. Generally speaking, the heat treat is pretty consistent, but it's not like all of the Taiwan knives are made in the same place, right? I don't know exactly who the OEM is for this, but it seems to be, if the fit and finish and the overall attention to detail is an indication of, how much they cared about this, putting it together, I'm going to guess the heat treat was part of that. If the heat treat is done optimally on CTS XHP, it's a wonderful steel. So, what do these come in at? The base price for this guy, the G10 version, is $135, and you'll pay $10 more for the carbon fiber version. What do I think about that? I think the price is excellent. I have no issue with that whatsoever. I can get G10 and the S35VN for less than that. Yeah, there's always going to be some model out there that's, using a similar high-end steel in G10 that might cost a little bit less for one reason or another. But am I happy with this package here, getting this exact profile of knife, coming from Spartan and Les George, getting this blade geometry, getting this steel, right? This whole package. Am I happy? If I were to pay $135, yeah, you bet. I think this is great. I really hope they continue this line. Right now, they just got 2 models, as far as I'm aware. But I really hope they continue this and do other models in this line, because I like the idea of just a straightforward working tool that's using a high-end steel and some G10 coming in at a reasonable price. It's nice to be able to get something that it looks very, Les George for way less money, or something that's from Spartan for way less money. I'm happy with this. The construction is great. I trust it, and it feels like something I could go out and use, and that would be a great hard-working tool, very resilient tool, a very versatile tool for a very long time. I think that's great. Highly recommendable. This knife is absolutely going to go on my most recommended knives playlist. Thanks again to Spartan for sending this guy along. I wonder if there is a website somewhere. No, but check them out on Instagram. Check out their website. Links for this guy right down below, so you guys can check this knife out. I think that's going to be pretty much it for today, guys. Please follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.